Africa's startup scene has had a record year when it comes to funding, but the increased attention has come with its own challenges. Now, is ranging from scalability, looking for employees with the right skills, and slow policy adoption, not forgetting the COVID-19 pandemic. So what are the lessons we can pick from this? For this CNBC Africa special panel, we are joined by Teta Ndejuru, the Managing Director of Inkomoko, Mr. Shyaka Charles, the General Manager of 250 Startups, and Yacob Berhane, the CEO and co-founder of Pariti as well. Yacob, thank you for making the time. Shyaka, thank you. Thank you for making the time. And Teta, thank you for making the time and for joining us for this conversation. Let me start it from the top. Teta, 2021, not much has changed going by the environment we're in from last year, 2020. But organizations like yours have tried to create a change when it comes to the startup scene or SMEs on the continent. What have been the major challenges that you have faced? And here, please feel free to use Inkomoko as an example in 2021.
Thank you so much for the question, Arnold, and thank you for having us today on your show. 2021 was a hard year. I think everybody thought that COVID was going to finally be over and business was going to start back as usual. But recovery, of course, and continual restrictions made it hard for us as entrepreneur support organization, but also to the businesses that we serve. So in the past 12, 18 months, what we really learned is the need to pivot, the need to adapt to the context, the need to continue on giving access to affordable financing products and capacity building to our entrepreneurs. So us at Inkomoko, we work with micro, small, and medium enterprise throughout the country. And we also serve the 5 refugee camps and host communities. So we learned that access to digital tools, access to capacity building, and access to finance in a time of scarcity is very important for small businesses to survive. We also learned, and it's informing our upcoming strategic plan for our 2030 vision, that there is a need to strengthen market linkages and value chains. So I'll stop there and let my colleagues also input.
Some of those conversations that you've hinted on a little bit later on, and I'm sure you'll be ready to expound. I want to bring Yacob into the conversation as well. Yacob, you are based out of literally the market that gets the most funding in East Africa, which is Nairobi. But your challenges haven't been unique. What have been some of those that you have faced as a startup in that market? And please feel free to piggyback off Teta.
Yeah, I think well, first, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be on CNBC Africa and talk about our fast growing tech ecosystem. And to piggyback on what Teta said, I think it's been hard for a lot of founders in 2021. 2 things that I've noticed is with the inflection point of capital coming into Africa and the tech ecosystem seeming to take off, we've seen so many companies raise, but there's still a lot more work to be done. There's a lot of founders that are struggling to find the resources that they need to build their businesses. And the second thing is community, which is at the center of what Pariti is doing. It's just, our tech ecosystem is fragmented. So a lot of founders are kind of going at it alone and learning lessons the hard way when they don't have to. Unfortunately, if they had more conversations with each other, they might be able to learn from each other and be able to build together and not feel like the battle is so lonely. So we've seen founders in our ecosystem help each other get into Y Combinator, get introduced to other investors, make partnerships. One founder in our ecosystem actually got a partnership with EcoBank, and open that door for another founder in our ecosystem. So those are the trials and tribulations, but some of the beautiful things that we've seen out of 2021 is the coming together of community.
I can see Yacob is already looking at the glass as half full. There, Shyaka, I want to bring you into the conversation. Kigali's tech scene or startup scene, hasn't been attracting anything close to what Nairobi has been attracting over the past 4 or 5 years, but that has grown gradually over the past 12 months also, and we've seen the arrival of things like Kigali International Finance Center also bring some kind of spotlight onto that scene. What have been some of your major challenges faced by many of your members at 250 Startups?
Thank you, Arnold, and thank you for inviting 250 Startups really to contribute on this show. When COVID really hit us in one or the other, it was really challenging to access the market because everyone is trying to social distance and respecting all these SOPs, and really access to market became a challenge. And what we really decided in-house is to focus on product development, so that by the time we get a chance to meet the clients, really we can sell our products. And of course, at the end of the day, or on that, when access to market is really challenging, you need to build, and you meet few people that you can actually validate your product they're trying to build. Because one of the challenge, one of the things that we really focus on is how do we make sure that we support a startup company, we support a product that actually user-friendly at the end of the day, and really that was really challenging. Then funding, we have seen different more supporting organizations coming in there and supporting around, and all these financial institutions that are coming in supporting young innovators. But when you look at, you build something and really require capital for growth, it's still a challenge, of which I believe it's a continental problem, but we need really to work on it. So those are the two main challenges that really had with this year 2021.
Thank you, Shyaka. Teta, I want to bring you back into the conversation, and here I just want to pick a little bit from what Shyaka and Yacob have mentioned, regarding the financial institutions that have been able to come on board to help, or in a way be some form of intermediary for these for these startups. You, on the other hand, you are more or less a vehicle. You tend to bring other partners on board to work with, to help create this environment, or to help startups and SMEs navigate such turbulent times. What have been the major takeaways, and how have you been able to build that those partnerships and ecosystems?
Thank you. Yeah, I do. So let me first say that, as Yacob was mentioning, partnerships are extremely important in a time of scarcity. And the way Inkomoko, the way we're set up, is that we have Inkomoko that does business development services, and we have a sister company called African Entrepreneur Collective Rwanda Trustee, which is our own private loan fund. So we raise capital, and we also do fund management for partners, which allows us to deliver on capacity building and access to finance. So we have a license from the Central Bank of Rwanda, which allows us to also loan at lower rates. Yes, and how do we bring partnerships on? I think it's because we're able to offer both. We're able to not only build capacity within the business, so teach our entrepreneurs how to manage their finances, manage their revenues, look at sales and marketing, and also access to market, investment readiness, and also offer them an access to finance.
I'm going to come back to you on which of those that you have mentioned is most critical for a budding startup. Yacob, bring you back into the conversation. Access to market is another of the things that you mentioned. How have you been able to navigate that over the past 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I think accessing different markets is extremely challenging. People like to look at Africa as if it's like one monolithic place, but it's not. You know, it's over 50 countries, and there's so many differences in culture, language, legal jurisdictions, and it depends on the type of business you have. So Parity being an online marketplace allows us to move in and out of different spaces and provide opportunities a lot easier than if you are a logistics company or an agriculture company. Their barriers to entry are much higher. So for the companies that we support in our platform, we try to make sure that they have the right access to different networks that can help them get into those markets. Other things that we're doing is our M&A partnership with MicroAcquire, which will be really important. I think over the next 9 to 12 months, maybe 18 months, we'll start to see a bigger run-up of M&A on the continent. A lot of companies that are doing well and growing in their home markets might experience challenges going into new markets. And that shouldn't be the reason your company shuts down or limits its ability to continue on its mission. That might just be a signal for you to maybe merge or acquire or be acquired by another company. I think that will birth a lot bigger businesses in Africa. And I think it also signals the maturation of our ecosystem.
Thank you, Yacob. Charles, the access to markets has been tackled by Yacob. You mentioned access to finance as a major challenge, and I believe just a few minutes back you just had a conversation with prospects who want to tap into that space. But attracting that FDI into Rwanda, are there other options outside just looking at maybe the global north to attract that investment or finance into startups, not only in Rwanda but on the continent?
One of the challenge we really have that the continent when it comes to access, funding, one is really need to work on it as Africans. How do we really support ourselves? Because we have seen in Nigeria, we have seen more funding happening around because they have local investors. Okay, so as long as we don't have really local investors, when you talk of ecosystem, name it. Because we have seen it in markets like in Tunisia, we have seen it especially in Nigeria. We have seen more investors, local investors, so it's easier to attract investors from other continents to come in your country. Because when it comes to risk taking, when you have some local understanding the system, the ecosystem, it's easier to get either the Series B and all raising money in different stages when you have someone really understand the ecosystem. But when you're really seated here, you're in Kigali, you have a startup company, and it's doing good, but at the end of the day, no one is believing in it locally. So one of the challenges we have, we need to stop investing in plots of land and in real estate and invest in startup companies, and then in that way we'll solve that problem. So we have seen like Rwanda Angel Network really coming in, and they actually invested in one of my company here. And that's the only way to go really to attract more investors. And we have seen different conversations with other investors that are actually interested because they know someone that is already investing in your company. So it's easier to attract them to come in at the end of the day. Because nowadays, on the continent, having a proof of concept is not enough. You need to really have someone that is in place. But I'm also calling upon the banks, and because when you look at the loans that are really giving the soft loans, they are not really soft in the in the way that a founder, especially the company that are coming up with software systems companies, because you need really all these documents put in place, and the banks are really looking at tangible assets that can really act as a collateral. So that's something that we really need to change in order really to attract more investors and support more startup companies in the continent.
Thank you, Charles. Teta, you've had the challenges that have been mentioned there by both Yacob and Charles, access to markets, access to finance. You hinted on them. I want you to expound. As one who deals with these startups on a large scale and SMEs, which of these in particular, or if you could hint on one that has been a big challenge for these companies, and especially if they want to take that next step of scalability?
So, of course, I think access to finance is a pretty obvious one on the continent for startups. But I want to also say access to market, because even though we're looking at AFTA and other treaties like EAC, you have to also think of accessibility, and there's still a lot of things to do when it comes to accessibility of products to markets. So I think it's a bit of both. I wouldn't say one will bring more than the other, but I think access to market, if you have a big consumer base and you can prove that you can access it, then the investment will come. So I will go with access to market.
I don't think Charles is going to agree with you, especially when he mentioned the real estate bit of it. But Teta, I want to stay with you there, and because unfortunately time doesn't seem to be on our side. There's been a widening gap between, let's say, startups like Pariti, like 250 startups, and potential employees. The lack of skill sets, people are not being trained for what's needed today. The arrival of new jobs as well. How can you bridge the gap, between attracting the right talent and having it employable in the current startup and SME space?
For me, I think we have to. It has to be worked on both ends, right? I think there is a huge opportunity for startups to work with schools, to look at internship programs, to be able to also build skill within the upcoming cohort of youth. In Rwanda, you have the skills office that is trying to and doing a very good job at mapping out future needs. So an environment, a cohesive environment to help do that is of importance. But I think that as entrepreneurs, it is important to have internship programs to go and interest people in the things that we're doing and train them on the job. And I'll stop there to let my colleagues also come in.
Yacob, I'll throw a similar question to you. You employ people, you've tried to employ people. More often than not, they don't seem to, to cut it for you. Is that a similar challenge that you're also facing on the Kenyan startup scene? And if so, how do you hope it can be navigated?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that we've employed people that haven't been able to cut it. I think we've employed people that have been able to cut it. I don't want to cut anybody that's worked with us short. I think it's really challenging for startups and young talent, though. When you're young and just starting out in your career, if you're joining a startup, usually there isn't a lot of capacity for training, which is really hard for a young talented person because they haven't developed time management. They probably haven't developed their own ways of working yet. So if they get on the job, they can lose confidence because there's no one there to guide them. And it's not a reflection of, their intelligence. It's just they don't have coaching or mentorship. And there's a huge gap for that to be filled by a lot of different programs and other startups out there. I think as a company grows, you have more capacity to train people. But in the earlier days in a startup, you're scrambling really, really fast and really hard. And usually there's very little guidance. So I think there are multiple steps. There's going to be a lot more talent that's available because they're going through the fire right now. They're working at different companies, and they're also seeing the emergence of startups becoming successful. I mean, you have to be realistic in the sense that, if someone gets a good job and ends up working at, Stanbic or McKinsey or something like that, asking that person to leave that safe and secure job to go join a startup that's a pretty big ask of someone, especially with how early our ecosystem is. But as we see more exits, as we see more wealth being generated from startups, we'll see more talent on that continent leaving corporates, joining startups. And I think another opportunity is the diaspora. There's a lot of people across the world that have roots that are tied back to Africa. And I think it'd be amazing if we see more of those people come back to the continent and transfer some of the skills that they've gained from a lot of other global corporates and being in some of the more affluent markets or something, getting more exposure, I think it's a beautiful opportunity for them to bring that talent home and transfer those skill sets.
Thank you, Yacob. Shyaka, you've run a few internship programs at 250 startups, employed a few, great young, skilled people, but retention has also always seemed a challenge. So when Yacob mentioned something like, Barclays, McKinsey, Baroda, or any of those big institutions coming after the most skilled, how do you ensure that you retain those people within the ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, that's what we did for the past 4 years, really bring capacity building as one of the components that we've been really doing, getting these fresh graduates that really employer keep complaining that they don't have really practical skills. How do we bring in the ecosystem, as in bringing more tech lawyers that can support tech companies, bring in business people in terms of finance, those who are graduated in finance, and then match them with our startup companies here, work with them for the entire 6 months. And guess what? All these big institutions that you name it here in Rwanda, they have actually hired them. Why? Because we have given them what they didn't have. It's one thing to have theory, but also it's another thing to work with a startup company. And another interesting part, they've actually come up and started their own business, because we will keep talking about the skills that we don't have enough skills, say really in the fresh graduates, and with the challenge, which comes as a challenge when they come to startup companies. And we're like, how do we really solve it? And when you look at actually in the content, I had a chance of really going to other African countries. And when you look at the content, it's no longer now a biggest challenge. Rather, the challenge is, and how do you really penetrate into when it comes to scalability? How do you scale your business into other countries? Like my friend Jacob is really in Kenya. How do we come to Rwanda? How do you really have access to market to Ghana? How do you go to all other countries? But when it comes to skill set, that's how really we try to solve it. And I believe it's a good model that really works, and it's not so expensive that especially the government, the private sector need to engage with the hubs managers and really nurture a lot of people that really understand, because the mindset change game, it's something that we really need to invest in more. And we have seen a lot of jobs really created under the hubs. And for us, really, it has been really helpful when it comes to set as a challenge, how to solve it.
Thank you, Charles. I just want to wrap up this bit of the conversation before we go into looking at what we can expect from 2022. Teta, is there a silver bullet to all these challenges?
I think there's a silver bullet to a lot of these challenges. I think we see a lot of market creating innovation coming up with the challenges we faced with COVID. I think when we look at all the universities coming in on the continent, it's also a beautiful cohort of youth educated youth coming out of these universities that will make our market attractive in terms of human capital. I think we have more and more support when it comes to the ecosystem. Looking at Norskin coming into the market, and also political will. Yeah, I think there's a silver bullet to all these problems, and a lot of solutions that are being created within the market.
Yacob, let's continue to look at your glasses, maybe potentially half full, going into 2022. What do you think are the key lessons that maybe yourselves at Pariti have picked from this year that you're going to carry into next year, and how do you hope the year pans out to be?
Yeah, I think the glass half full for us is that we get further together, and I think working in harmony together, we'll be able to develop more talent. We'll be able to attract more capital that will be able to fuel more startups, and I think 2022 we'll see a lot more interaction between different markets across the tech ecosystem in Africa. And I think that's going to really unlock a lot of partnerships and growth, and maybe lower the hard lessons that we have to learn, and help founders have a better fighting chance to succeed.
Thank you, Yacob. Charles, looking forward to 2022. What could be the key takeaways and lessons from 2021, and what should we expect in the new year?
Thank you so much. One of the key lessons really is we're waiting for investors that we don't have a plan with. I'm talking of on the level of startup companies. If you're building your company and your own goal, the only goal you have is waiting for an investor investing in your company, I think you're not doing it the right way. But if you really look at the market and the customers become your investors, I've seen many companies really succeeding. So that's one of the things. And two, we need to look at attracting. We need to have masterclass when it comes to investment readiness, but not only on startup companies, because that's what we've been doing it for the several years as a continent. But we need to really look at these rich young men and women around, how do we really change their mindset and invest in this business, because we have seen many people really being rich and being by investing in the startup company. Then another thing we have seen the political will, as actually my friend Teta really mentioned, and as recently we have seen the government of Rwanda really putting huge money in Hunger Fest, which is last week, and really companies, they want a lot of money, not a lot of money, but it's money really to start with, which goes and change mindset of many Africans. So if we can have more African countries doing the same on the last, let's say, have fest in every year at the end of the year, so that we can really show even young people that, hey, instead of looking for a job, you can actually be an entrepreneur, and the government supports you in winning this amount of money, so that we can have more unicorn companies in the continent.
Quite the hope there from Charles. Shyaka. Now, unfortunately, we have to bring this conversation to an end. I want to thank our panelists, Teta Ndejuru, the Managing Director of Inkomoko, Shyaka Charles, General Manager of 250 Startups, and Yacob Berhane, the CEO of Pariti. I was your host, Arnold Kwizera. Now, for any suggestions, or if you want to be part of the conversation we just had, you can tweet us at CNBC Africa, or you could tag me directly at The Real Kwizera. Have a great rest of your day.